Lars is here for the 6th time as a speaker here. So, and you've been participating as well, haven't you?
No, just a speaker. Yes, so it's cheaper.
If you make it.
Yes.
So, without further much ado, I'll just give the floor to him and a little round of applause. Hey?
Thank you. I just learned a new word in Estonian, enalona, or something like that, close. Before that was just derviseks. So, yes, I'm Lars, or Lars Sjödahl, or Lars Johan Sjödahl, depending on how you say the name, but we'll get back to that. It's kind of tricky, and my presentation is finding bug-rich focus areas, like if you had X-ray vision. And I'll pinpoint the stuff where it feels like you have X-ray vision if you look at just the surface. And some difficult words here, construct and validity. So the background for this was that me and my girlfriend were out driving, not here, but as an example, I took an Estonian example. And there's this thing in Google Maps when it tells you when you're going to be there. So I said, how long is until the next exit? Well, they can just calculate that from the, and then we started talking about average speed. Well, is it average speed? Is it how fast I'm driving? Or is it the time limitations of where those roads are that we are going? And I know it's also sometimes when there's congestion in traffic, it says that it's going to take longer, so it knows when people are going slower. So is the average speed, it calculates time of arrival, is that from that? From how fast people usually go there, or that other cars are driving now? Well, which is it? Like, it's average speed, but which kind of average speed is it? And then we started talking, we've been talking a lot for months about that, and that's one of the constructs. Yes, we're nerds, she's getting more. Yes, I'm winning her over to be more of a nerd. And sometimes I thought, well, how do you do that? And we just, construct, yeah. And I have a few slides that are text heavy. I try to just have images, but it doesn't work. So you can try to count how many slides that are text heavy here. Hint, that's one of the things that's hard to count. So I'm going to start with so what's a construct and construct validation with this? And if I look it up in the dictionary, it says, well, it's a mental construct, object, property, or any kind of classification. But easier way of saying it's a kind of thing. And that's the problem, what makes it that kind of thing? And one of the times, first things I bumped into this was at the pub, and there were a bunch of bars. Some glasses were on coasters, some were on the napkin, and some were just there, and somebody had a wine glass, but they borrowed some beer from someone else, and somebody said, well, how many beer glasses are on this table? Well, how do you count to one? Does the wine glass with beer in it, is that a beer glass, and the glass that was on a napkin, was it on the table, or doesn't really count? So how do you count to one, and what makes something a thing and not a different thing? And that's usually where I find, if you start thinking about this, you notice that other people have thought about it in passing, but it's usually not how can this go wrong? And when you start thinking about that or noticing, hey, I think they're using different definitions of this construct. That's why I usually see that, I can see there's a bug here, or there's probably going to be a bug here. And how could you see that? Do you have X-ray vision or something? And well, you have to know these things if you're a tester, or something cool, and I try to tell them eventually. So I'm going to start, so you don't start reading. First, I'm going to tell you the strategy overall that I have that is kind of how you keep this in mind, and then I'm going to go through a lot of examples in this presentation of the different kinds of constructs I usually find that I've picked out some examples of how does this trip you up. And then I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to have 2 walls of text at the end, so you can take pictures of that. You can take pictures, of course, but I'm going to come back to this. And then end presentation and so on. So general strategy is when I see something and I come up, this is, again, here's a construct of a kind of one of these types. So which kind of the different error-prone kinds are there here? And then I notice when people talk about some things the same way. So I'm making a trip, I'm making a journey over here. Well, is it one journey, but you're using 2 buses? Is that 2 journeys, or is it one journey that you're still doing? Is it 2 legs of the same thing? If I go somewhere and go back, a round trip, is that one trip? Because it's called a round trip, but it's actually 2 trips, right? So the synonyms I use, and other people like, well, somebody uses another word for something. That's a synonym that doesn't mean exactly the same thing. So they're kind of interchangeable because you kind of know what you mean, and that's always a hint that it's going to be dangerous when we're discussing it. So I try to, I write these down, like very quickly, yes, the word or something, what we're doing, and the synonyms. And then I try to go deep and find out, like, how else could this be defined? How can this be, and then find how can this be a problem? How can I test for the different ways that the actual definitions actually are? And then how can I then prove that there will be inconsistencies somehow? So let's start off with some examples. Simple thing, which colors are these rabbits? And I need some hands up now. Somebody give me an answer. Which colors? And of course it's going to be yes?
Non-colors. So, what is the colors, right? That is, it's black and white.
Yes, it's black and white. Thank you. But you also are hinting at the right thing. So they're a black and white rabbit, or one is kind of gray and the other one is white. And that's all we used to have in TV, for instance. So there is black and white TV. When I grew up, there were still some old TV sets people had. There were black and white TVs. And then the fancier ones or the proper ones that people had in the real homes, and not just summer homes, were color TV. So there's black and white TVs, and then there are color TVs. But you then say, well, there's black and white, and actually it's gray, it's a grayscale because there are different things in there. And then there is color, which are like red, orange, green, all the colors of the rainbow. But we have said that's what color are the rabbits. They're black and white are also colors. So some things you say, is it this or is it this? You sometimes hear, is it testing or is it checking? Well, checking is part of testing, right? I want to say in 2 days or something. Like it's going to be 1 day until this happens. But that means 24 hours. Usually when I say it's 5 days from now, but they can also mean the contrast of day and night. So in that case, it's a contrasting thing, day versus night. In the other one, it's the whole thing. So I call this like half contrasting or half self-containing. What else is there? Well, testing or checking. But then you go to other places saying, like, you have to find what's actually, when you talk to photographers, this is not a black and white picture. It's sepia or sepia. And it's actually kind of a grayscale, but it's not gray. It's a different color tone. It's a chrome. So the chrome, and then you only have degrees of this chrome. Same thing with old monochrome monitors we had were just green on a black background. So, sorry. You can still use more technically correct terms for some of these things, but we've started using these only because there's a contrast and we need to be very precise. And that's sometimes when people are like, well, that's semantics or something, but sometimes you just have to show one of the examples. Well, we can't show this on a black and white TV unless we put some film over it so that the hints of white you see are this color. But color also leads us into something else, which is when you find something that tell you something that is green, and in RGB colors, green is quite simple to say because it's one of the. Sorry. Green is one of the values you give it. So red, green, and blue, you can tell them easily. But when you say orange, it's more difficult because you have to pick one of them. And if you say then light green, well, then you know there's more of a white, but there's also pale green. So what's the difference between light and pale green? And you can't really, well, these are like points in this huge color space. There's also cultural concepts I get to later. We don't say pale red, we say pink. So is that a different thing? Well, in Danish, the word for pink is light red. So for them, there is some such a thing. And also in other languages, there are two different words for different kinds of blue. But what's greenish blue here? And I see like this aquamarine at the bottom here. Okay, I have slight color vision deficiency, but that's a green color. That's not a blue color. And hands up, who's with me? That's a green color. Yes, okay, at least 50%. So like it's very hard to, so where do you draw the line? And if something is almost exactly at red, but slightly off, is that a different thing? Well, you can't really tell. Well, the problem is, how do you say that something is exactly at one point? And it's not just colors, this is color space, like different, you slightly near it, you'll say, well, that is definitely red because it's just a few like digits off from where you are. There's also a thing when you come to positions. So if you give somebody coordinates of where somebody is, and I've seen it examples that there are 15 decimals of your longitude and latitude, because they want to say exactly, well, this is where it's, we've defined it here, so we have to say this is where it is. But if you have 15 decimals, you're saying the atom where it is. Like it's too exact. And even if you have like, no, it's that point, well, then it's just this position right here, and my foot is covering it, but am I standing at that position? Exactly where am I? Well, like you can't tell that with one coordinate. You have to see like a box for where I am. So anytime when you're trying to like point something out in one point, like a very precise thing in a larger continuum, you always get into trouble of saying, well, I'm here, right? I'm on stage. But which part is on, if I'm on the stairs, is that still on stage? Kind of. So that's a problem that's usually gone up and say, we have to define exactly how far away is it, and then again you get vague because you have the borders of where's the outskirts of that. So often when you want to do something, instead of, for instance, this is like a home test for checking your ketones. And in that case, if they say, well, if it's yellow, you have this level, and if it's brown, you have this level. That wouldn't really work, because what is yellow and brown in that case? So if you can, try to just give exactly the scale you're trying to use yourself. So show and don't tell. And that's actually a phrase from writing or making scripts. Whenever you can. Then other continuous things that we have made into smaller chunks. Often it's time periods, but also repeating processes. And we have loops, lots of loops and other things in software, but also a lot of processes. You start somewhere, and then at some point you fork, and you go back to the beginning, and you go over again. And always watch the jump there. What happens at the jump, and how do you count? Because I'll get to that. Here's a calendar of the year. Yes, it's big enough I can see here. So we're here over at May 15th. There we are, May 15. And then I tell you something's going to happen next weekend. Next Saturday. Is it next Saturday? Is that tomorrow? Well, it's Thursday today. So two days from now. Well, that's this weekend. Next weekend is like, that's the 23rd. Right? That's always, so when does it become the next? Like at some point we roll over from Sunday to Monday, and then all of a sudden, yes, it's the next weekend. Except in this calendar, because this is American, and we have Saturday at the end and Sunday at the beginning. So if I ask somebody on a Sunday, can you finish it this week? And they say, easy, I got 7 days. And they say yes, and then they're not finished that night, and I'm like, oh, I'm disappointed. Well, you didn't finish it tonight. Well, you said I had the whole week. So where do you, like, when something, we've chopped time up in all these days up into chunks, but where do you start and where do you end? And what do you do at the borders? Always check that. Also, another thing, if you have these periods, and I said, well, I lost 2 kilos last week. I lost 2 kilos last month. What is the period that I lost those 2 kilos? Is it the 15th of April? Until the 15th of May, because that's the last month that has happened. Or was it the last month, which is April? So, and then I've gained them all back. So what is, and there might be a structural thing that I say last month or the last month, but we are sloppy, and we'll say one thing and we kind of mean the other, and well, of course you know what I mean. No, you don't. So the beginnings and where did that start? And I said, well, we're doing it now. We're doing a day from now. How exactly? Is it this minute? Is it this second tomorrow? Because it's not the same thing. And it's always tricky. And then, of course, yes, you're aware of the whole thing with leap years and leap days and time, what do you call it, daylight savings time and time zones. And you always think of that, but actually, like when you're just talking about the basic things of where is this first, and what is the second, and what was the last one, and the next one, that's usually where it gets you, because there's cultural conventions and ways we are saying it differently. And then also we come to, if we narrow it down to a day, like later tonight, there's going to be a party, but people will probably leave around, at midnight tonight. But it's not midnight tonight, because midnight isn't today. It's always at the beginning of the day, right? Midnight, but we think conventionally that midnight is the thing that comes at the last point of the night, that's when you switch over. But for when we do that in computer systems, midnight is the very beginning of the day. Or it's also tricky when you talk about, in November, we had the first snow this year last night. No, you didn't. That was in January. Because that's the first snow of the year, because we don't think of that. Yeah, so it's the first snow of this winter, perhaps, but not that. And counting where you think start and end. You can find this, like you don't have to know how it's made in the code, but then when you start looking at things, I imagine I was a visitor from another country or even another city, and I checked I know that if I go from here, there's a direct bus that goes up here. So from to, but then it says, no, there's a switch. I have to transfer to another bus there. Like, what's happened now? It's like, have they changed bus lanes? I'm not sure. And if I was stressed, like I was going here, like, there's 5 minutes, but I have to find the bus on this station where the bus stop where I change it. And also, might be delayed or something, change of time. But actually, you zoom in. It's city bus 3, place A. So, what are they changing the bus? No. They're not changing the bus, they're not changing the driver. It's just that you can't have eternal loops in the software there. And you don't say, put in like all the stations, it's going to go round and round and round and round. It's the same bus that goes around. And they had to make a start somewhere and a stop somewhere, and then they made the switch. So all of a sudden you have two things that are both at the beginning, at the end. Not like midnight that has just at the beginning. This thing has to be at both ends. And the software didn't handle that. So instead you stress people out that no, you have to make this connection unless they actually say, no, you can just stay. And people often ask me, do I have to get off before they can get back on? No, you can just sit here. But it's not obvious. So things that are chopped. Also, if you have this as a loop, a continuous loop, or like a for loop, last thing, and then you go back to the beginning, you wouldn't have to have this beginning and the end at the same time. If you make polygons to say areas, this can also lead into trouble, because there are always loops. They have to be a loop in somehow, so you have like 3 coordinates, to define it. But when you put it in, when you describe it, you can put in 3 because the last coordinate will always be the same as the first. But some places, they write the last one as the first, they copy it, so the last is redundant with the first. And that can also cause troubles back and forth if you know the last is always the same, so I scratch that. Well, we already did that, so now it's actually a coordinate that you're scratching. So the same bus goes round, and well, you lose that. Lower dimension boundaries, and again, big words, but when you have areas, those are 2 dimensions. But when you look at the boundaries of things, you don't really think that, well, you describe them the same way where you are. So is the boundary between these the leftist thing on the yellow part or the rightist part on the red part? And it's neither, because it's the thing that exists in between. That's the border. Well, we can't describe that in the same way we're describing these. No, it's another dimension down. So yes, the way I try to think of this is like when you're describing something that are like adjacent to each other, zoom in. So if you zoom in as far as you can, does it change? Because usually it should. Because is there something down there? Otherwise, what do you do when the bit starts doing like rounding errors back and forth? These are straight lines, but if they're slightly to the side, diagonal, then they are, like I've been working a lot with like public transportation and areas and geometry the last years, so that's why I have a lot of these examples. But if you have something that goes slightly on the side, it's just slightly angled, then you will have some coordinates that are slightly off to one side, and it's jagged, and depending on who is calculating this, you will have different results. Because you could have, depending on how long you are, you need to have the same amount of, you have to have a certain amount of values, coordinates in between them. So when I see those things, I always like to try to zoom in or see what happens if it gets too big. What happens then? And the real world, this is what borders are like. They do have areas because they're real. So it's just, well, somewhere here, it's not that, like somewhere in between, I'm sure there's a line that's been defined, but even like what coordinate systems are, we have to date them by a certain day because continents move slightly, and also where the North Pole is, where the Earth circulates around, we can measure that. That's actually slightly moving. So then exact north is not the exact same north as it was. So trying to model it and saying that's something that's real world, and you're trying to model that into something mathematically exact, then just zoom in and you'll find the problems. And lists, I've talked about nothing before, and absence, and I love the concept of how do you make the difference between null and zero and an empty string and empty. And then one of the things that usually tricks things up is lists, empty lists. I was buying something at one of these automated checkouts, and I scanned and, oh no, I scanned the wrong kind of bag. I'm gonna have the other kind of bag. So I asked someone to remove that thing. And they said, add something, like put something else and scan it. I said, no, I'm gonna remove this, I don't wanna have this. No, you have to scan something else first. Do you see it? Do you see it? Because once I get to that step, that scan the first item. Once I've done that, I'm going back to now I can actually continue there. Now I have a list of something, and I can't go back to not having a list. Well, you'd have a list of 0. That's not a list. Well, to us, sure, a list can be empty, but to them, it had to be 1. I could also argue that if you have one thing, like, okay, what's your list of options, right? I'm going to do that thing. If that doesn't work, what are you going to do? Oh, that's my thing. That's my list. Well, one thing is not a list. So I say this isn't a list either. But to them, in their way of doing things, yes, it is. So yes, this isn't a bag. It's some spelt I bought. But like the same thing applies. If I want to take that out, I have to put something else in instead. So there's 0, 1, or 2, or something else that could be the real value of what a list can be. And all other kinds of container constructs, like a list is one thing, collection of things, a set of things, other ways of doing this. And I've done other assignments where there's also, I added something to a list and then I removed it. Same thing, I added the first item, I added a second item, I took them out, I had one item, I took the last item out, and I had an empty row. I had one row, but it was empty. And I said, well, this is wrong. And they say, no, it's good, it's gone. Yeah, but now I have an empty row. I used to have no row. Well, that's the same thing. No, it's not. We all know it's not the same thing. So, and then, they were kind of stubborn and said, no, it's not a big thing, it's not a big issue. I started talking to other teams. Turns out one of the teams had updated their internal model, and not talked to the other team about it. So yes, it was a big deal. How could you find that? So I'm like, well, it's just look at that. I understand you must have used different constructs, or different definitions of the same construct. I need to step this up a little bit. Yes, unfortunately, this is not the right thing. I used Google Translate to get there was this, I started with saying this word, enalone, yeah, something like that. You know what I mean. And I love English because I can get up at 11 and still say, I got up in the morning. Because they don't have the concept of analona. So that would be a pre-noon, but that doesn't exist in all languages. So we have morning, pre-noon, afternoon, and they just have morning, noon, and then afternoon. So some things we can't even express properly. If I'd say pre-noon, they'd probably understand it, but they wouldn't write it down because, no, that's not what you're saying, morning, and then it would be all conflated to them. And the same thing goes, of course, between not just countries, it's also industries. What you mean by something. If I say, oh, I have a return. If I tell an investor, that's a good thing. If I have someone who does customer service, I got a return, that's a bad thing because something's broke and we have to fix this. So just be careful what you say and what you can do about them. And my favorite pet peeve when it comes to systems, it's getting better the last few years, but my name is Lars, that's what I say. That's sometimes, but actually my full name is Lars Johan Sjödahl. So sometimes telemarketers call and oh, hi, is it Johan? I know it's a telemarketer because they got my full name of some database. So I know exactly what to expect. But that's my full name, so what's my middle name? I'm not expecting an answer, but I don't have a middle name. I have 2 first names. Oh, so it's like Lars Johan. So no, it's Lars and Johan. Those are the 2 first names. A middle name is something else that we don't really use in Sweden very much, but it does exist. So, okay, fine, I'm gonna take a trip to Estonia. Write your name exactly as it says in your passport. Well, that's not exactly my name. My exact name is Lars Johan Sjödahl, and I can write that down. Oh, sorry, you can't do that in our English, like in the system that we have to enter your name. Okay, so you probably mean Lars Sjödahl then. And fine, I type that in. My user information on the airline's homepage where I have a user account says that I'm Lars Johan Sjödahl with an Ö. But I can't type that in for the passport, and also my boarding pass skips the E, and it's Lars Sjödahl. So what is my real name? Like, it's very important because of airport security and so on. Well, make it easy so that you actually can write it and define what do you mean. And then I get it and it says Lars Sjödahl, Mr. Because apparently they want Mr. to be part of my name as well, for a title. Well, a title isn't really a part of your name, is it? So what makes something the same then? So what's the most common name in this list? It looks like Michael, but well, if Johnny and Johnny is the same thing, then it's Johnny. but is that the same thing? It sounds the same, it just spelled differently. So does it make it different if you spell it different? I can tell you from looking in genealogy records that people were kind of about how you say something as somebody's name. Like, was it Marie? Was it Mia? Was it Maria? Well, it's the same name, right? Anna with 2 N's, 1 N, whatever. It's so that you have to point this down and have it very exact. It's a modern construct. So it goes back to, when do you change something enough that it's no longer the same? And when do you add something on? Like Mr., the title that I add on and tack on. Or if I upgrade something to, like if I travel and I have second class and I go to first class, is that an upgrade? Is it a bonus? Is it an attachment? Or is it a different ticket? I saw a car drive like the other day, and it had like one of these, they had rails on the roof, and somebody strapped a package to it. That's not part of the car. But if it was one of those cargo boxes, that's part of the car that you can put cargo into. So some things that look very similar, are they part of the car or are they not? Or is it a different car? And also where you like stop things up. And then also where do I have Kyle? Maybe I'm not sure. Well, I said my name again with Lars dahl and the said, no, I have this thing. And he said, oh, yes, because he's German. He said, oh, that's with an umlaut, O with an umlaut. And that's my point. No, it's not. I can write it like that, but that's, sometimes I have to, same thing with the here. I don't have that on my keyboard, but I can have a tilde and the O, so that's not what it actually, it's a separate letter. It's not an O with an umlaut. But if I look in a German dictionary, all the words are under O. But it's an right? So I look at the end, no, it's not there. It's to them, it's not the same thing. It's just so, where do you make something, when is something not the same anymore? So, then we get into all the difficult things, nitty-gritty in the organization. And any one of these I could have talked about for many minutes. Like, what's active, archived, or deleted, or disabled, or passive. If I have a passive user, is that a user? If I have an archived member, is this still a member, or is it somebody that used to be, but aren't anymore? And often in newspapers, I see, oh, the suspected killer. And that's like, yes, they should have a different phrasing for that. Because like, if they say the 37-year-old killer, that's, a killer that's 37 years old. Or the, the male killer, that's a killer that's a male. But if it's a suspected killer, like, oh, what else is they suspected of? Because it sounds like it's a killer that's suspected of something. But it's actually not the same thing. So those two, that's a way of describing it should be different. So all these other things of pending, when you restore something, when you do it inactive, does it still count? If you have an admin, you have users and then you have admins. Well, the admin is also a kind of user, right? So all the users should be able to do this. Now, are you just talking about the non-admin users, or are you also talking about all kinds of users when you describe things in requirements? Statuses of different sorts and levels. Also, there can be added levels and sub-levels that will then no longer be, I have sub-levels on this. Well, is it then all of a sudden you have to describe, it's not just 2, it's 2A and B and C. Well, then it's all of a sudden you have a hard time describing that something is they're on the same level. So I'm going to come back here to the rough strategy that I have. Already way past my time. Which error-prone constructs are there? Oh, now the fun thing. Here I changed again, rough strategy. So is this the same slide? I just changed the title, but is this the same slide as I had? Because I said I had a certain number of text-heavy slides, right? Is this the same slide? Is this count? Is this a separate one, or is it just the same one that I changed a bit? I try to find out what kind of these different kind of constructs there are that are usually messing us up, and then I try to find out how many different ways can I define this. Like I was talking first about the ways of doing average speed, or the different ways of saying a member is something, or different ways of saying that it's red. Like how can I define that? It could also be like the paint red, not just paint red on a screen or something. And then the different kinds of like, how do you count to 1 and see if something is the same? How can I change it? Like if you have an idea about something, which ways can you add to it or take away from it or attach something to it? And see if attaching something to it, like getting the upgrade or putting the title or doing the other things, does this change it? And best thing is if you don't agree with your colleagues, because if you don't agree, then, or if you feel that we will probably not everyone would be on board with this, then you know there's a possibility for a conflict. So does it change the essence, especially what it can do, what you can do with it? Is it a slightly different thing? And then what else things are you basing on the data that you have? Can I get something else if I change this? Will it affect other things? The slides will be available later on, so if you have them, and I also can give them if you hit me afterwards. Yeah, and here's the different ones, the summary of the different things I've gone through here. You can ask a question if you don't remember which one of these are. I'm waiting for people to take pictures because I'm going to go back to this also. Otherwise, I'm easily findable. You can find me on schedule and so on. I just recently got Blue Sky, moving away from Twitter or X or whatever you call it, the social network formerly known as Twitter. And that's me. If you want something else, I can bring this back and talk about it. That's my presentation.
So we have time to take maybe 1 or 2 questions. There we go.
Thank you very much. I think it's a bit difficult to put this question or how to phrase it exactly. Because the level in which you go here onto questioning these constructs and all of these concepts, it goes a bit into pathological. Yeah. But I'm curious if you think this is something that you can teach, or it's something that you just have more of a personality trait, or like.
Oh, it's definitely the personality trait. That's one thing. I ask why.
Yes,
but if I interrupt you, I think you can learn the practice. You don't have to know knowing the fancy talk and calling it the construct and so on. But it's what it is. But using it of just make exercises for how can we explore this.
But then, do you think this can be taught? Yeah.
Yes.
Because I have the same level of questioning everything, but that's just the way I am, and I've always done all kinds of things. It's not just that I do it just professionally. So, does it require, in order to get at this level, does it require to have this innate kind of nature, or it could also be developed in a professional sense? There could be a course where you just go to learn how to question everything.
I have a hard time seeing that this is a theoretical course, so that's why I want to talk about examples when I do this. But in Myers-Briggs personality type classification, there's people who like specific examples and people who are more generalists and find rules. And I think that people who have rules will more instinctively go for this, what makes it that thing? What is it that makes something a member? And try to figure that out so they can define it. And sometimes a good way to do is that just have examples. This is a member, this is not a member, so you can talk to both things. And they will also get it, but I think maybe half people will have an easier time figuring this out. But it's much easier to do it with examples in a domain that you are working. So you have examples here, can we think about this and sit down and do it practically? So practical thinking, or do it on papers or something.
So thank you, Lars, for answering the question.
Yes, I'm available later on, so you can ask more questions.
So catch up with him later on. This is why we have a conference, and that's why there's a point to come over, and that's why we have coffee breaks. And thank you again for coming so many times. And
love it here.
Little token of appreciation.
Oh, thank you.
Bit of chocolate.
Oh.
And something you can hang on the wall. Yeah?
Yes. I'll have a frame for
So
it.
thank you again.
Thank you.
Little round of applause.
Sorry for running so late.
Thank you.